But yeah, so thank you so much for having me to share my experience. So my experience with this kind of patient focused giving is with the Circle of Giving, which is a program in the OHSU Foundation. And I have some slides to go through just to help you get to know about this. And then I'll give a little bit about information about the donor's perspective, and then I'll give my perspective as a awardee. So the Circle of Giving is a program that's supported by a group of women that are very passionate about advancing women's health research at OHSU. So it's not a single patient that is contributing here. How this program works is there's a collection of women that all contribute a minimum gift of $5,000 each, and then it's pooled. And then those funds are used to support research awards that are 125,000 each. And a really nice thing about this program is that it makes contributing to science accessible to the general public. So it lowers the barrier for entry. And while the minimum gift is $5,000 each per donor, they do have a reduced amount of 2,500 for members that are under 45 years of age. This is just a little history about the Circle of Giving. It was founded in 2006, and I think the first award was 2007. They've invested a total of over $3 million, and they've supported 28 research projects. A lot of what they focus on funding is one, women's health, but also they fund early stage research that's kind of a pivot or a new direction for the investigators. Um, and one of the criteria that they look for is something that's going to be able to receive more funding, and that additional funding, when you sum it up over all those investigators, it sums to over $50 million in additional research funding. And that's been my experience. We use this for a pilot project on in glycomics. So we were looking at the sugars that are in the bladder and how they relate to the urinary microbiome, which was very new and a novel perspective. And since then, we have leveraged, and my co-investigator has secured NSF funding for that project to continue it on. And we do have it as part of my other ongoing research that we're working on as well. So the Circle of Giving grants have led to a lot of transformative advances in women's health outcomes. They support a variety of different projects, from clinical research, translational research, and basic research. And these are just some of the topics that they have supported over the years: Alzheimer's disease, cancer, menopause, high-risk pregnancy, nutrition, etc. Um, So their award process is similar to many other grant processes that you might encounter as a scientist. They have a request for proposals that opens in October. The applications are due. They get reviewed by a pool of scientists. As a prior awardee, I am on that review panel. Sometimes, if my expertise is thought to be needed for the applications that they receive. Um, and then they have a panel of experts, which are the scientific review committee, that meet and rank the applications. And then what's a little unique is that the Circle of Giving then has a selection committee of volunteers that reviews the top applications. So they're scientifically vetted already, and then the actual donors are the ones that are making the selection of the top applications. And then there's a granting day that they hold that has the top applicants come and present directly to the donors, who select the final awardee. And I think this is a very unique process, and it also makes that the donors are very engaged how their contributions are being used, and that uh, they really feel involved in that. They're not just donating to some void and they don't know where their money goes. So from an awardee perspective, that the application's a little different than what you would encounter in a typical grant application. You do have the main application is actually in non-scientific language, and that's the bulk of it. So you need to really work on refocusing how you're telling the story of your science to reach the general public. And you do have a complimentary research summary, which is tight, only 2 pages that you get to try to convey all the important details for the scientific review. And I thought that writing this application was really um, a really valuable experience because, in your scientific training, you're taught to speak very tersely and, very technical and getting to the scientific points, and you're trying to motivate other scientists. But then trying to change the audience to how do I communicate with the general public is a skill that I don't think we hone as much. And it is important, and it's becoming increasingly important in these times. And then the granting day presentation in particular, I thought was a very valuable experience, and it actually changed how I do my introductory slides for even talks when I'm doing a scientific presentation. And I really frame the scientific problem more towards, how is it going to impact a general person, right? Like they might not care about the urinary microbiome, but they certainly care about overactive bladder and urgency urinary incontinence, especially if you put it in the perspective of what if it was you, what if it was your mother, what if it was your sister, right? And how it could really disrupt your daily life. I also, in creating that presentation that was directly to the donors, I spent a lot of time talking to clinicians who I typically collaborate with, but I was really curious, like, what was their perspective? What was their patient perspective? How do they communicate to their patients so that I could communicate better to the general public that were the donors? And then I also practiced and got feedback from family members, from my aunts and my co-investigators' aunts as well. And they had some really interesting perspectives that were different than what the clinicians said, specifically around the language that we were using. I think we were told to use the word pee. Funnily enough, the my aunts really hated that I used that word. They were like, it's urination. Like, I'm not an idiot. Please use, you know, I can deal with some scientific language. So that was definitely an interesting experience, and I definitely felt it was very engaging and rewarding. And this is definitely one of those um, when I am asked for a follow-up report, I'm always very happy to share, the progress that we've made. I feel like it's really a powerful experience having the people that are funding your research be kind of accessible and being able to update them. So that's all that I have. And thank you.
I'll just mention to start that I've done fundraising both through grateful and generous patients, but also fundraising just having to do with my research because I've had a foot in both the lab and the clinic. And in fact, my professorship was raised from a person just interested in my work and was never a patient of mine. So I want to talk, I'm going to talk more general principles. I'm happy to talk more specifically about fundraising from patients, but I just want to give a broad overview. And I want to start by saying that in raising, so this is raising money directly from individuals. Um, I want to just mention up front that this is a lot of work. Um, and it does take follow-up and kind of ongoing. That being said, if you get it up and running, it's been a continuous income stream for my laboratory since I got to Stanford. So just a few general principles. And I'm going to reiterate a little bit about what Lisa just talked about. But the first thing I will say to you is get to know your development officer. And this is a tee off for Hilary, but the development officers can be tremendously helpful in many ways, and I'm going to let her tell you about the ways. So I'm not going to touch on that very much. But the other thing, not only can they help you in terms of identifying funding sources, but they can also keep you out of trouble. Because you want to make sure that when you're doing fundraising, you're not violating HIPAA and a variety of other things. So you have to be very careful to follow their instructions. And, they have had me put opt-out things in letters I've written to patients and stuff like that, that I don't, just tell me if you don't want to hear from us again and that kind of stuff. So make sure you get to know your development officers. And I think most institutions will have them. We have a development officer assigned specifically to the department. And then also I've worked with development officers in the cancer center. This is just reiterating something that Lisa brought up that I think is extremely important, and that is you should have an elevator pitch. And what I mean by that is you should be able to succinctly tell a donor about your research in ways that your parents would understand if your parents are non-scientists, right? So you should be able to tell someone very briefly and clearly about your research and use analogies and use things that bring it home. Like, we're doing some work on protein glycosylation on the cell surface and how it regulates the immune system. And I talk to patients about sugar-coated cells just to bring it home. And there's many other analogies one can make that, you work with a circulating ligand that binds to a receptor. This protein sticks to the cell like a key in a lock. Nothing else can. So, this kind of colorful type language helps bring it home for patients and donors so that they can understand. If you talk about PCR, we Xerox a bunch of copies of this gene, many with PCR, right? So continually think about ways that you can explain your research that bring it home for the common person, for the regular person who's a non-scientist. No jargon allowed. And this is a problem that clinicians and basic researchers have. Clinicians kind of learn over time how to get rid of jargon. You come out of residency and it's all acronyms, but once you start talking to patients, you figure out how to communicate with them because that's very important in terms of them understanding their care. That translates over into research also. And then also the other thing that Lisa brought up that's really important is bring it on home. That is, you're doing this research, but where does it go? Just like a grant has significant impact, you have to bring it home to the donor. Here's who this is going to help. It's going to help babies. It's going to help this particular disease, because sometimes, what we work on sounds a little esoteric, but you have to bring it back to reality of how it affects the patient. Once you give them your elevator pitch, shut up, listen to the patient, listen to the donor, because I often, we have a few different projects going on in the laboratory. I might talk about all of them with the donor if they want to hear about them. They're going to tell you which ones they're interested in. So just listen to the donor, listen to their concerns. Again, my professorship was funding a project that I wasn't even working on at the time. But I told them exactly how I'd approach the problem, and that flowered into a whole new area of research for me. So listening to the donor is very, very important. And then the other thing I would encourage you to do, and this I've learned from our great development officers, is you won't need this often, but it's useful to is have a wish list, and a wish list that's graded. And what I mean by that is, what if the donor says, you finish talking to them and they say, gosh, I'd love to give you $5,000. How would you use that? Tell them. You should have a list of what you'd say. Oh, we need, whatever piece of equipment that is, that would further our research in these ways. Or this is going to buy reagents for xenium, or so the more specific you can be, not too specific, but the more you can say, here's how I would use this, or if they have a lot of capacity, I'm going to fund a postdoc, and that's gonna drive this project. So so have an idea, and then also again, Hilary's going to tell you about this, but it also helps ahead of time to know what the donor's capacity is, right? So is this someone who can donate $200, or is this someone who can donate $1 million, right? You need to know those sorts of things. So, and with that in mind, then that helps you, formulate what your wish list looks like. So those are those are kind of my general principles. Two words about development officers. The first thing, they're actually one point. This is not a one-way street. The development officers, sure, they do tremendous amounts to help you out. You have to help them out, right? The way you help a development officer is give them written summaries of your projects. They usually will ask for that, but write them up. And again, you write them up in lay language. Give them the wish list that you're going to present to donors, right? Here's what I could do with $100, $1,000, give them that wish list. When they ask you to, give talks. So we oftentimes at Stanford have events where well-to-do people show up, and I get asked to give talks quite often. And I'll be honest with you, I don't often get anything out of those. It is very, very rare that those talks lead to any direct funding for me. However, the next time the development officer has someone come in and say, this guy's really interested in prostate cancer. This person is, seeing someone for BPH. I know who can handle this, Brooks, right? So your name is right there. The development officers think about you first because you help them. So like I said, this takes work, but they're really your friends, and we always help our friends, right? So I think that's very important. Then the final thing I want to talk about is, a little bit kind of nuts and bolts of working with donors. One of the things that our development officers have helped with, and I found to be pretty fruitful, if someone expresses an interest in your research, give them a lab tour. Um, uh, it's it's great for them to come and see what a research lab looks like. It gives you an opportunity to talk about kind of what your day-to-day is like. It gives them a chance to meet the trainees, and there's nothing more fun for them to meet the trainees, and vice versa. Um, uh, and it also shows your trainees how to, gives them some insights on how to do fundraising also. So I found a lab tour has been really useful. And um, patients, they set up time. They're busy people oftentimes. They'll set up an hour, they stay for 3. So it's really good. Um, when someone donates to you, realize also that again, there's often it's often reciprocal. So uh, uh, I pay attention or I give out my contact info to people that donate to me, and I pay attention when they say, "Hey, I got a bum knee. Who do I see?" So I not only will give them a referral about who to do, I will make sure that they get in to see that person in a timely fashion. So this is a lot of work for me. But that being said, this is a relationship you have with these people, and you treat these people like family. Um, so what else? The other thing I will mention, and again, this comes into the work thing, that this is a lot of work, is these relationships can take time sometimes. And example again, I'll give my professorship as an example. There were many things I learned from this. The first is the individuals that donated were it was one person in particular. She and her husband were members of the Hoover Institution here at Stanford, which is a conservative think tank. And so I went to many functions there for a few years before anything happened, which was funny. I always referred to it as going behind enemy lines, but but what I did learn is, it did help build that relationship. And I also, and the other thing I learned from it is to be my genuine self. Um, and by that I meant, you're going to convey your enthusiasm for your research, but you're also a human being. And when, I was asked litmus test questions, uh, I said I'm a registered Democrat. And it became sort of a cute aspect of our relationship in that she was converting me. So, so it was like a mother-son type of relationship. So so make sure you realize that many people that have the capacity to donate funds have very good BS meters. And so, um, uh, be honest, be genuine, and that they appreciate more than telling them what you think they want to hear. Um, what else? One thing I've done for the past 25 years is um, I write a letter at the end of the year. So December 1, I mail out a letter to anyone who's ever donated to me. That letter summarizes research highlights over the past year, and then ends with an ask. So here's, this has been a super productive year. We published blah blah. And I just present published work usually. I don't, it, you know, but again, it's written, explained in layman's terms, um, about what we've done research on, what its significance is, how it impacts whatever diseases. And usually it's I'm focused on the prostate usually in this letter. Um, and then that letter, I mean, I view that letter as my annual report. Just like you have to put annual reports in for grants, you put an annual report into your donors. And I don't care if they haven't donated to me for 20 years, they all get a letter. If anyone's, and with that opt out at the end of the letter, if you don't want to hear anymore, I haven't had anyone turn me down. Or if someone expresses interest in my research, I add them to the list. Um, and what that letter has allowed me to do is I have people who donate, a small amount every year, but they've been doing it for 20 years. That adds up. Um, and that's been an important, because realize those gifts that come in are unrestricted funds. And the unrestricted funds means that I can fund the wacky idea that I have that no funding organization is going to help with. Um, what else? Um, I will also, I have a couple coming up, go out to lunch with donors. My old boss, Pat Walsh, was a master fundraiser and at Johns Hopkins, and he would, this is for the clinicians, he would schedule his patients such that the person who was the best prospect or was a donor, he would schedule them for the 11:30 appointment in his clinic in the morning, and then after their appointment would take them to lunch. And then his phrase was always, the great care you've received here at fill in the blank was the result of research. Do you want to contribute to our research? to keep, help us continue to improve care. And we all know what's going on out there. You can make a very compelling argument that funding has become terrible right now, and we have to rely on them. So, also, I'll mention that, or the other follow-up. I mean, I would, the person for my professorship, I would contact her every 1 or 2 months. Anytime I published a paper, I'd send it to her. With her permission, I put her in the acknowledgments of the paper. So I think that's very important. But again, it has to be, some people want to remain anonymous. Um, and the other thing is, over the years, it isn't all work. Some of these individuals, my wife and I have become good friends with, and that's, we socialize with them, go to the ballet and things like that. So it isn't all work. It can be fun also. Um, the last little asterisk here, the last thing I'll mention is that for those who are clinicians, the best time to approach someone, and maybe Hilary was going to touch on this, is usually after surgery, but within the first 3 months. That's when they are, they just went through this big event in their lives, and that's when they're the most grateful. And you have to listen for that also when you see them in follow-up, because people might want to help, but they don't know how. So, gosh, doc, you got me through this thing. How can I help? Right? It'll be an open-ended question like that, or I'd like to do something for you, or, but they don't really know how to approach it. And, you can just say to them, yes, part of your care came from the great research being done here. Would it be okay if I put you in contact with my development officer that you have this beautiful relationship with? Right? That's what I usually will do, is just put them in touch with someone like Hilary. Um, and that so That's it. I'm going to stop right there. I can't think of any other points. I think I got through my little notes here, um, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you for inviting me to speak, and thank you everyone today. Dr. Brooks, you set me up perfectly. Thanks so much. Hopefully I will highlight some of what you said, and also Lisa. And I think, echoing, this is a relationship business. It is definitely a team between the development office and the faculty. And someone reminded me the other day, people give to people. So as much as they give to the research and to the institution because they have trust in it, it really is the relationship that they can develop with you and the clinician and also the development officer. So always keep that in the back of their mind. So just a little bit about facilitating fundraising priorities and philanthropy's role. So we have typically the medical center and school will set priorities at the beginning of the year. And then of course we have donor interests. And so really our job in the development office is to blend those two together. Sometimes they intersect perfectly. Right now we're moving into a big cancer campaign and a lot of focus on AI. So when I'm working with faculty, I'm asking, is there any work that you're doing related to cancer? Is there any work that you're doing related to AI, so that we can bring those messaging into the larger messages? So always just be aware of where your institution is focusing and how fundraising and development is following that. Sometimes it comes together, other times it doesn't, but it's always good to be aware of it. Typical development fundraising office structure. I'm on what's called the major and principal gifts team. So I work primarily with individuals and private family foundations, typically with donors who can give $250,000 to 10 million. Principal gifts is higher. We also have corporate and foundation relations, annual funds, which is some of what Dr. Brooks was talking, people who will give consistently at possibly a lower level. But interestingly enough, those donors can turn into a planned giving donor later in their life. So if somebody's been giving $100 a year for 10 years, for 15 years, that's somebody you should be working with your development office, as you as you grow in your career, on, is this somebody who might be interested in leaving a bequest to support my research or research ongoing. So that's, just a framework. Would love to thank Lisa for setting this up with the Giving Circle. Your vision and your messaging is so important. And I think Dr. Brooks also said that, having your elevator speech ready to go and ready to talk about, starting with stories. So we'll send this out to you. We use a rubric that we call problem, promise, how. Really get good at articulating your problem. How are you going to accomplish it? What resources are needed? Going back again to Dr. Brooks, what can I do with $10,000? What could I do with $150,000? What could I do? Dream sometimes with $500,000. So you're ready to do that, and really talking about how your research can make the future look better. And I think it's so important. Lisa mentioned it, Dr. Brooks mentioned it, really talking in non-scientific terms, not using acronyms, right? Not being able to take your NIH application and turning it into something your grandmother could understand. Or, I'm an English major. The last time I took science was in high school, which was a long time ago. So something that the person who has not been living in science. For basic science in particular, I work with the basic science team, and also I worked with our basic science at University of Colorado Boulder. Very, very important to just talk about the importance of basic science. You all have been so well funded by the NIH and by the NSF for so many years. The importance of basic science to getting to translational science is not necessarily in a patient or a prospect's mind. So one of the things you want to get really good as articulating is how basic science gets to the bedside and gets to the patient, and saying that in a very, very compelling way. So, common reasons that people will give, we see so much, and I think Dr. Brooks has experienced this. A lot of it is expressing gratitude to their provider. They've had a good clinical experience. So when Christina said at the beginning, if you're really a basic scientist, if you can find a clinician who is willing to work with you and partner and share resources and highlight your research along with what they're doing, that's really going to help you, because we at Stanford and most other institutions are really based on the grateful patient model. So we're working closely with physicians, looking at HIPAA compliant patient lists, identifying prospects with that. So it can be more challenging in the basic sciences because we just don't have a flow or a pipeline of people moving through. So definitely the partnerships with physicians. So these are all just very different reasons. But, in the grateful patient realm, I sometimes have physicians who are uncomfortable speaking to their patients. And then I had a patient contact me and said, oh, I was uncomfortable thanking my physician. And I'm like, okay, let's get the two of you together so that the physician could really understand it's okay to accept their gratitude. And it's also okay to, help them. Many people find meaning through giving. So really helping them find a way to give, to express their gratitude. So there's a development cycle, and Dr. Brooks alluded to this. The first really important part is identifying who might be prospects. So we will work with the clinicians with HIPAA approved lists. They will also refer patients to us, and we'll look at some of that wealth rating. The cultivation with which Dr. Brooks said could take years. I have a gift that I've been working on for 6 years, trying to get us in front of the donor that is for pelvic health. And we are finally close to having a meeting with the donor. So be patient. Sometimes it takes 6 years. I have another one I'm working on right now that it's moving very quickly. So just know it can move in those different ways. But the cultivation, it's bringing them in for lab tours, it's sharing information on a Zoom call, it's presenting at an event. And that all leads to the point where we really feel comfortable soliciting the prospect. We tend to do that for you because it sometimes is more comfortable for us to be in the solicitation space and just talking about the money and the details. There are some faculty members who are very comfortable making the ask themselves. So, depending on your level, I always say courage wins. People typically are not offended when you ask. They are not offended if you ask for too much. So, when you're working in this area, courage can really open doors. And then, of course, after the gift, and as Dr. Brooks said, we try to keep you out of trouble, keep you in line with institution policies, gift agreements. That's all part of our role and the help that we provide. And then the stewardship, which is the ongoing reporting back and developing of the relationship and going back into the cycle of giving when it's appropriate. So, we'll work with faculty. It's a two-way thing. Some faculty will email and say, hey, I met with this person today. They seem really grateful for care. I see some signs of wealth. Could you check into them? So we will look at that. And of course, our role, I always represent my urology faculty first when I'm contacting that person. But we also do have what we call a donor-centered process. So we will look at where else are they giving at Stanford, where else might they be interested. So the gift doesn't always come to you, but that's because the donor then in the conversation, we find out they might be interested in another area, but we're always trying to bring it back. So sometimes the gift goes somewhere else and then it will come back. As Dr. Brooks said, there are wealth screening tools that we will use so we can help identify, is this someone that we should spend a lot of time on, or is it maybe someone we should do an email or a letter? It helps us narrow down the group that we're working with. So these are all areas that we'll look at together with the faculty. These are just wealth indicators to look for when people are talking about taking trips or their homes in Italy or their children's schools or hobbies. We're always assessing. We don't know what care they're receiving. And that's part of how we protect HIPAA. So we are only talking when we're meeting with the faculty about, did the patient have a good outcome? Did they seem grateful? Is this an opportunity for us to reach out and see if we can initiate a conversation, or for the faculty member to initiate that? And then I won't go through these, but we'll share these. These are just some cues. And I think Dr. Brooks ended with that, of what people might say that you can use to turn into an opportunity to introduce them to your research or to development. And this is when I go back again to the courage, because I think most of you, and we have many physicians who will be like, oh, thank you so much. It was nothing, right? You're very humble. It's what you do. But to be able to take that expression of gratitude and at least assess if someone is interested in giving to your research can turn that into a gift and into a long-term relationship. So these are just answers that we give to people so they can practice. And when you've done it as many times as Dr. Brooks has, it becomes very easy and simple to do with that. So that's how Grateful Patient fundraising works. And I have one other tip for you that we're just learning about. There's a new organization. It's a nonprofit. It's called Research Hub. And so, Christina, if you guys want to put it on your list of resources, it's this very interesting model where donors can go onto their website and look at research projects that researchers have listed and give to those projects. And so we recently had through psychiatry, actually an early career faculty member who had a research project on Research Hub. A donor found it. The donors give to Research Hub, and then Research Hub gives to Stanford. So we don't have the direct connection with the donor. And then there's also really interesting, you can become a peer reviewer on the Hub too. So it's new. It was started by the gentleman who founded Coinbase. So it's just as we're starting to look at alternative fundraising sources, and I'm always looking at how is fundraising changing beyond the grateful patient and the individual development officer donor faculty member structure that they're in. This is a new interesting model, and I wanted to share that with you because I know in this funding environment, everything is a great option. So that's what I have for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak and kind of explain what that relationship is, because I do know it confuses a lot of people at times. I'm going to do a couple of things, and I appreciate all of the comments that have been made before in the presentations, because it kind of sets up a little bit what I'm going to talk about in terms of authenticity and making the ask for funding from patients. But before I do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and my background to the authenticity part of things, talk about the UCF and how we relate back to the AUA, and then get into a little bit of how we fund some of our AUA and UCF initiatives and programs. So about me, I am a bar attorney in the state of Maryland. Please do not let that hold anything against me. I am actually a pretty nice person when it comes down to it. In terms of my background, I initially went to law school in order to become a criminal defense attorney. Turns out that's not that fulfilling. I've had a little bit of experience with patients in terms of my grandmother who passed away from breast cancer that metastasized to her brain, as well as a cousin of my first cousin who passed away at the age of 34 from a pretty aggressive form of lymphoma. And then just in the past year, I've had my father-in-law suffer 2 bouts of bladder cancer, and my dad is about to do aquablation. So all of that, I'm sharing this personal information because I think it's important to sort of level set, especially when I talk to people about money, that I'm not doing this just because I want a paycheck, or that it's just something that I, kind of fell into. It's something that I actually care about. And I think that kind of speaks to, the power behind the ask, and not being afraid to make that ask because I know what it really means to the patients that I know. So I ended up coming into the patient space through the International Myeloma Foundation, where I was actually the director of policy and advocacy. Because of my law background, I spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill, making asks for research appropriations for things like congressionally directed medical research programs. Myeloma did not have a line, then it got a line once I got there, which pat on my back for that. And then I transitioned over into the AUA as director of policy and advocacy as well, and brought some of that expertise to the AUA to help set up some of our patient alliances that currently exist, as well as our appropriations work that's being done there. I still work for the AUA and to a large extent because the Urology Care Foundation is the official foundation of the AUA. I'm in the AUA headquarters. I have members of my team that are purely AUA team members like Johanny, as well as members of my team that are purely UCF team members like our development officers. I kind of straddle both. I sit on our executive leadership team for the AUA as well. So that's sort of the relationship. We are the official foundation of the AUA. We have within the corporate structure of the AUA, we are one of the 3 corporate entities that exist under AUA Inc. We're really 2 other corporate entities and a bank account, which is our PAC. So that is sort of how we relate. That makes us a little bit unique in the sense that we're a membership-driven organization. A lot of our fundraising efforts that we have really look to our members, but that doesn't mean that it's not related back to our patients. What I mean by that is we have, much like Hilary was just talking about, we have our members who want to direct funding over into the UCF for one of our various different programs like research, and they don't know how to make that ask. And I always tell them, be brave. Is definitely one of the elements, but also the answer is already no unless you actually make the ask or you bring it up. So what the worst that's going to happen is that the answer is still no. We have things like bereavement where people will direct funds in their wills to go to the UCF. We have planned giving, I should say. And we also have a number of patients who have given fairly large sums, although I wish we could get into the $10 million plus realm, but we're not quite there yet. So I'm a little bit jealous of Stanford, but I guess that's probably fair. But we are very lucky in that we have patients who are interested in continuing to fund our efforts. So what are those efforts, and why am I talking about this so much? So you see me here, my contact information is up there. Please feel free to reach out to me. I put my picture here in case you forgot what I look like while I talk to you. But the rest of this isn't quite as important. What is important is what we're bringing up. And I think Johanny probably talked a lot about this, which is our Bridge Award, which has been funded, and that's been funded by funds that previously existed in another program. And then our Transformative Research Award. And why I'm bringing up the Transformative Research Award is because it is partially being funded by patients. So we had a cultivation event, which meant that we went out to California. One of our board members that we have a really great relationship with, and he is a lay board member, meaning he has a non-science background. He is not a doctor, but he is on our board, and he is related to urology in that he is involved in the industry. And he was willing to put on this event at his country club and invite all of his friends to come. And we raised almost $300,000 this year because of that event. And it's from people who, when we sat down and talked to them, much like we've talked about here, they're having those one-on-one conversations, explaining what specifically we were going to use the money for, what giving us $10,000 would do, what giving us $20,000 would do. All of those tools were being utilized in the strategies to talk to them and bring them around to the idea of donating those sums of money to the UCF specifically for our Transformative Research Award. And it's been very successful. We're on track right now with our goal by the end of the year of reaching that $300,000 mark. And we're hopeful that by the end of next year, we'll have raised $1 million that will then be matched by the AUA, and we'll set up this award to give out $60,000 a year to really collaborative type research. I know the reason I'm also talking about this is because I would love for all of you to apply, since you're all investigators, because the other end of once we actually do get funding is how the heck do we give it to everybody? How do we let people know about it? How do they know they qualify for it? And so I'm doing my shameless plug work now to tell you all about it. So yeah, we're really excited about it. We're very appreciative of the AUA board of directors that helped give the matching funds, because that's sort of the sweetener. That's another tool that we can utilize when it does exist. The UCF does primarily try to fund all of these endeavors through endowments as opposed to operational grants. What that means is we take, and we are the fiduciary for funds. We hold it in perpetuity. They're invested in different vehicles, and then there's a 5% rule that I'm sure everybody who's in development is aware of. But essentially, we try to utilize 5% of the corpus or the body of the fund as a spinoff to help cover our operating costs, to go back into the fund to keep it healthy, and then also pay the award, and which is how we get up. That 3% is the amount that goes away from the corpus and into your pockets if you're the award winner. That's how we end up with $60,000 for a $2 million endowment. We have a number of other areas that the UCF does handle. Again, I'm primarily focusing on research since you all are investigators, but we do humanitarianism, we do patient education. As you can imagine, working in patient education in particular, we are working with other patient organizations. We're collaborating with them, and we're trying to find ways to really leverage our experience and our ability to reach out to the patients so they get the material. So that's always been very, very important. We spend a lot of time talking to our board and trying to figure out ways and strategies to work on their network. So if your organization or you yourself are on boards, that's always the relationship aspect there is always very helpful, because if you're sitting on one board, you're probably sitting on some other boards as well. And so we spend some time with our board members to sort of walk through their network, try to figure out who they actually know, who's in their cell phone, not just who they've sort of passed in church before. We always look at other larger foundations like the Gates Foundation, for example, or the Clinton Foundation, or Mackenzie Scott, and the name of her foundation escapes me, but it's huge. Any of these foundations that have large amounts of money that they would be willing to direct towards urologic health in some way, shape, or form, we're open to approaching, but we won't want to do that out of nowhere. We really want to make a personal and deep connection. And we want to have somebody kind of do that introduction so that it's a warm handoff as opposed to a cold call. We've had some success with that in the past with groups like PCORI, and we're looking to continue to do that in the future as well. So I was trying to keep this brief so we'll have time for questions. I have other slides in here that just show things like our application process. If you are interested in applying, again, Johanny can answer all of those questions as well. So she's our research director. And I've thrown a slide up here that just has our contact information for our research grants team in case anybody here is looking to apply to any of those research grants. But I'll stop there. So if there are any questions, we might have some time to answer. Thank you.